By late afternoon, the outer mountain had reorganized itself around a question. What was Lin Fan now? The question moved faster than the answer. It passed through the meal hall, the outer quarters, the herb path, the well, the training yard entrance Xiang who was no longer allowed to use, and the shaded steps where disciples gambled with spirit grain they could not afford to lose. No one asked the question in front of Lin Fan. That was the first change. He walked back to East Lower Quarter with a small packet of clean spirit rice, 3 heat-clearing pills, and a written instruction to report symptoms before nightfall. The packet was not generous. The pills were low-grade. The instruction was half treatment and half surveillance. Still, the items in his hand were more than he had owned that morning. Resources acquired. Leash accepted temporarily. Fear spreading. Zhang Hu punished. Root mark open. Lin Fan adjusted the packet under his sleeve so others could see enough to know he had received something from the elders, but not enough to measure the value. Visible reward mattered. It told the outer mountain that touching him might have cost. Hidden insufficiency mattered more. It reminded Lin Fan that the sect had not become kind, it had become interested. Interest could be spent. Kindness could not be trusted. The path to East Lower Quarter passed the lower well. Usually, disciples crowded there in the afternoon, drawing water, trading insults, and blocking weaker students until they paid in chores or grain. Today the crowd parted before Lin Fan reached it. Not widely. Enough. A boy who had laughed during the spirit root test looked down into his bucket as Lin Fan passed. A girl who had whispered that his root was cursed stepped behind her friend. 2 brothers near the well stopped speaking mid-sentence. None bowed. None greeted him. That would require a decision. They gave him the safer gift of avoidance. Lin Fan took it without acknowledgement. Acknowledgement would make the avoidance visible and force pride to resist. Better to let fear pretend it was coincidence. Near the dormitory row, 3 younger disciples stood in front of his door. They moved when they saw him. One moved too quickly and bumped the wall. Lin Fan stopped. The 3 froze. They were not Zhang Hu's followers. Not directly. Minor outer disciples who orbited whatever strength seemed closest. Yesterday, they might have leaned on his doorframe and laughed if Zhang Hu told them to. Today, they looked as if the door itself had become unsafe. Why are you here? Lin Fan asked. The oldest swallowed. Steward told us to check whether anyone entered your room last night. And? No one. We did not enter. We only looked. Too fast. Lin Fan's gaze shifted to the door. The latch sat slightly crooked. They had entered. Not deeply, perhaps. Enough to look for a story. Enough to decide whether Lin Fan had hidden pills, talismans, or some object that explained the test. Outer disciples believed secrets were stored in obvious places because their own lives were small enough that secrets had to fit under beds. Lin Fan stepped forward. The 3 moved back. He opened the door. The room smelled of damp wood, old bedding, and disturbance. The blanket had been lifted and replaced poorly. The basin had been moved. The peg where his robe had hung in the morning sat empty, but the wall beneath it bore a faint fresh scrape from someone's sleeve buckle. No theft. Only search. Good. They found nothing because he owned nothing. Lin Fan turned back. Who told you to look under the bed? The youngest flinched. The oldest said, no one. Lin Fan looked at him. Silence pressed down. The boy lasted 3 breaths. It was Wang Lei, he said quickly. He said Zhang Hu wanted to know if you had hidden a pill, but we did not take anything. There was nothing to take. Wang Lei. One of Zhang Hu's usual followers. Expected. Lin Fan stepped inside his room and set the packet of rice on the table. Tell Wang Lei, he said, that if he enters my room again, I will ask Elder Gu whether searching a disciple under observation counts as concern. The 3 boys paled. We will tell him. No. They froze again. You will tell him exactly. If he asks whether I was angry, say no. The oldest looked confused. Lin Fan's voice stayed flat. Say I was not angry. That frightened them more. Good. Anger was familiar. Calm instruction traveled farther. The three fled. Lin Fan closed the door. Only then did he let the body lean against the wall. The fever had returned. He took one of the heat-clearing pills from the packet and examined it. Low quality, but cleaner than the treatment room leaves. Too much would chill the Dantian gate and worsen circulation. One pill now, half a pill later dissolved with warm water, and the last saved for emergency. The clean spirit rice would be cooked thin to avoid taxing the stomach while feeding blood. He swallowed one pill dry. Cold spread slowly. The root mark steadied. He sat cross-legged on the bed and began a shallow breathing cycle. Not cultivation. The root could not safely absorb chi yet. This was maintenance, keeping the poison ring dormant, preventing the new split from closing, and letting the right meridian settle after combat. Outside, voices passed his door. He came back. Did he say anything? Wang Lei is finished if he goes again. Did Zhang Hu really apologize? I heard he admitted yesterday. Lu Chen confirmed the rules. Why would Lu Chen do that? Because he stated them. Then Lin Fan used him too. The last sentence was whispered with something close to awe. Lin Fan opened one eye. Not awe. Fear-seeking vocabulary. The difference mattered less than the effect. In the first life, his door had been a place others kicked. Today, people lowered their voices outside it. That did not mean safety. It meant cost had entered their calculations. He closed his eye again. The observer's ring stirred faintly. Lin Fan did not respond. Perhaps the existence beyond the world found the shift interesting. A boy once worthless now altered the behavior of a quarter by exposing a root, humiliating a bully, and controlling rumor. Small movements. High divergence compared to the old path. Good. Let it record the lesson incorrectly if it wished. A knock came at the door. Not a kick. Not a slap. A knock. That was the second change. Lin Fan opened his eyes. Speak. The door opened a crack. Lin Ro stood outside with her patched satchel and lowered eyes. The herb garden steward gave me duty tags, she said. I brought. She stopped when Lin Fan's gaze touched the satchel. Cooling leaves, he said. Her fingers tightened. Only 2. They were damaged. The steward would have thrown them away. She was lying poorly. Not about stealing. About why. Lin Fan looked at the doorframe behind her. No one stood close. Several disciples, however, had slowed farther down the row, pretending not to listen. He could refuse. That would protect her from involvement and preserve his image of indifference. He could accept. That would give him useful herbs and begin shaping her into a controlled variable rather than an uncontrolled one. He held out a hand. She placed the leaves on his palm quickly, as if afraid he would change his mind. Do not bring anything again unless I ask, he said. Her face dimmed, but she nodded. And if anyone asks why you came? She hesitated. You were told to check whether my root pain required herb garden record. She blinked. By whom? You will not specify unless asked by an elder. That sounds safer than kindness. She lowered her head. I understand. She did not fully. But she was beginning to. Lin Fan closed his hand around the leaves. Go. Lin Ro left. The watchers down the row dispersed before she reached them. Lin Fan closed the door. Third change. People had begun watching who approached him. That meant influence was forming. Influence attracted predators. The next knock did not come that evening. The next message did. It arrived as a folded scrap slid under his door near sunset. Lin Fan waited 3 breaths before picking it up. The paper was cheap but clean. The handwriting was controlled, neither Zhang Hu's crude pressure nor a steward's official brush. It contained one line. At midnight, come to the West Training Yard gate if you want to know who told Zhang Hu to search your sleeves. No signature. None needed. Lu Chun. Or someone using him. Lin Fan held the paper over the small lamp flame until it blackened and curled. The first aura of fear had reached the next layer. Someone wanted to test whether it had substance. He did not sleep after burning the paper. Sleep would come later, in fragments, when the body could afford it. For now, the message itself needed dissection. The handwriting had been steady but deliberately plain. No decorative hook on the final strokes. No pressure marks from anger. The fold was narrow, the kind used by disciples who passed notes through training yard attendants. The paper smelled faintly of iron dust. West Training Yard. Not proof, but direction. If Lu Chen had written it, he wanted Lin Fan isolated at midnight. If someone using Lu Chen had written it, they wanted Lin Fan to suspect him and perhaps act against the wrong layer. If Han Wei's circle was involved, the message was not a simple trap but a measure of response. Would Lin Fan come when invited? Would he report it? Would he hide? Would he send someone else? Every possible answer gave information. Therefore, he would give an answer not listed. He would neither go at midnight nor ignore the West Training Yard. He would let the bait sit long enough for its owner to wonder whether it had been seen, then move before the chosen time under a different frame. That required knowing who else noticed the message. He had waited 3 breaths before picking it up, enough time for anyone watching the crack beneath his door to think he might be asleep or cautious. The hallway had been empty by sound, but sound was not proof. He placed the ash from the burned scrap in a small line near the door. If someone slid another note, the ash would shift. Small defenses for a small room. Then he returned to breathing around the root mark and let the outer mountain continue reshaping itself around his name. By sunset, fear had entered the corridor. By night, curiosity would knock. Before that, Wang Lei came. He did not knock. He stopped outside Lin Fan's door, shifted his weight twice, and said through the wood, "I did not search your room." Lin Fan sat on the bed, breathing around the root mark. "Then why are you speaking?" Silence. Wang Lei swallowed audibly. "They said you told the younger ones to tell me." "I told them exactly what to say. I only wanted to know whether Zhang Hu's people should move your things." "For safety." "Whose safety?" No answer. The corridor had gone quiet. Others were listening. Wang Lei realized it and cursed under his breath. Lin Fan let him stand there. Waiting outside a closed door under listening ears was punishment enough for now. Wang Lei had to choose between leaving without response and continuing to explain himself to everyone who could hear. He chose a third weak option. "Zhang Hu is still senior brother Zhang," he said. The words sounded hollow before they finished. Lin Fan answered softly, "Then stand closer to him tomorrow." Another silence. Footsteps retreated. The corridor breathed again. That exchange would spread too. No fight. No threat. No raised voice. Only a man sent to test whether Lin Fan's door could still be approached casually, and the discovery that even a door now had cost around it. Lin Fan closed his eyes. Fear was not only created by pain. It was created by making others spend courage on small actions until they began saving it. After Wang Lei left, no one approached for a long while. The corridor's quiet became dense. Lin Fan used it to listen beyond the door, a bull set down too carefully in the next room, 2 disciples whispering and stopping whenever his bed creaked, someone walking past twice and not finding the nerve to pause a third time. The absence of confrontation became its own report. Zhang Hu's circle was no longer confident enough to act openly. That meant the next move would be cleaner. Cleaner did not mean safer. It meant whoever moved understood something from Zhang Hu's failure. Lin Fan preferred that. Crude pressure could bruise. Refined pressure revealed structure. The person who sent the folded message had already done more than Zhang Hu, chosen a time, location, implication, and bait. That mind was worth measuring. He placed the burned ash beside the door and returned to the bed. The root mark pulsed once, then steadied. Night would bring another hand to the board. Until then, he used the silence to repair what could be repaired. He dissolved half a heat-clearing pill in a mouthful of water and held it beneath the tongue instead of swallowing immediately. The cold seeped into the blood more slowly that way. He placed one cooling leaf against the lower abdomen, not for medicine, but for sensation. Cold on the skin gave the body a false surface pain to focus on while the root mark settled deeper. The technique was crude. The principle was not. Pain could be redirected if the mind offered the body a simpler wound to understand. By the time the corridor darkened, the poison ring had stopped scraping with every breath. It still threatened. It still waited. But the mark remained open. That was enough for a night full of knives without blades. He folded the remaining cooling leaf into the corner of his sleeve and tied the cloth twice. If he needed it before dawn, he would be able to reach it with 2 fingers. If someone searched him carelessly, they would find only medicine already consistent with Elder Gu's treatment order. Even concealment worked best when it looked like obedience. He checked the door ash again. Undisturbed. No second message. The sender trusted the first bait or had already moved to another method. Either way, night had become a conversation conducted through absences. Lin Fan preferred that to shouting. Absence gave him time to hear the shape of intent. Intent, once heard, could be cut. He had cut louder things with less preparation. This one merely had to be left speaking long enough to reveal its throat. Then silence would become useful. Very useful.